welcome to Geek Out is Say. This is our game design edition. So we got a request from a viewer that they wanted to, because we make games, but we make tabletop games.
Yeah, so if you're watching this, it's probably because your teacher asked us to do a special edition, and I'm a teacher too. So he does not make games. So
I'm not a teacher, so
no, and he's not a teacher. So he thought, well, what better way than to ask some people who actually make games what it is that they do, so that you guys could get kind of an idea of what to do to make games.
And the thing about making games in general, it's kind of the same process, be it a tabletop game, like a board game or a card game or anything like that, or a video game. And I do actually, I am currently in the process of making a video game. Mm-hmm. So I'm learning a lot about that. And
yeah, because normally we make tabletop games.
The preliminary process is pretty much the same.
Yeah, and I don't think people realize that. People think that those board games, those card games, those tabletop games are like a totally different thing than a video game. But when you're talking about a design aspect part of it, you're looking at pretty much the same process.
And then when also right now in in school, when they're teaching video game design, they actually teach you by having you create a tabletop game.
Right.
And I know several of my friends that have done this, that have gone through like the Art Institute, or I think they even
at Northwest Vista, right?
They do some of that as well. But we're gonna go and give you some basic pointers of what to do when you're creating a game, be it a tabletop or even a video game.
Exactly.
So first thing I think would be theme. What's your game gonna be about?
Please, no more zombie games, okay? Like, there's so many zombie games out there.
There's too many.
We're all over it, okay? No more zombies, no more Plants vs. Zombies, no more zombies. Like, you get to be the zombie now. You're out to get the zombies. Like, we're all over that theme. Try
I
something.
was going to make a deck builder, but not necessarily. It would have zombies in it, but...
But that's not the core thing. That's
wasn't
just
the
like
core
one
idea of it. It was just one of the things that might happen.
There are so many themes out there. You can do anything from like Old West, Western type theme. You can do spies, James Bond-esque type theme. You can do steampunk,
Fantasy.
Any kind of space stars. You know, Star Trek, Star Wars, any of that kind of. Space Odyssey. Fantasy is really super popular and kind of overdone sometimes too. But fantasy is another big one. I mean, I can't talk because we're playing Diablo 3 right now. So, you know, what can I say? But theme is definitely where you want to start. For us, when we design games, and for a lot of the people that we know, you want to know what are you designing the game for, because that might then change how your game mechanic becomes, or any of the other parts to the game design.
Right.
Yeah.
The second is the type of game. What type of game are you? Is it a card game? Is it a board game? Is it a side scroller? Is it first person shooter?
Yeah. Is it third person? Is it multiplayer? Is it an app on your phone? Is it, you know, like a role playing game, pen and paper in a book where it's basically a storyline? Board game, you can have something like this. Like it's kind of limitless at this point. There's been so many game mechanics out there. When you're designing a game, you can even design an app game that is a board game. You can design an app game that's a dice roller, because that's a real popular type of tabletop game now, are those dice rollers where you have like a pool of dice and it's kind of a press your luck kind of thing. You can even design an app that's
I think I may be coming up with a dice type game pretty soon.
You better hit it while that mechanic is popular, right?
I know.
It goes in these waves of what type of game is popular. And that might be something you want to research too, is what type of game is popular. If you want to try to make up your own mechanic, definitely.
Because that mixes in with our next one, which is audience. What's your audience? Who are you gearing this game for? Like which age group, or...
Right. Right.
The different demographics that you're looking at to market this game to.
And don't pander. Like, if you feel like your demographic is going to be a female demographic, don't pander to that demographic because they don't like that. Don't pander to children. If you want to make this a children's game, some of you just got out of being children and you didn't want that. So think about your audience, but be cognizant of what they want and what their capability and what their level is too.
Right.
You know, look at other games in that age bracket of what you're going for, or in that, you know, if you're going for the female audience or if you're going for a predominantly male audience, you know, what are those things that are out there right now that are speaking to those audiences?
Yes.
So I think that's important.
And when you got that all nailed down, then you got to get into the mechanics. What are you gonna make that game do?
This for us generally tends to take the longest amount of time.
Yeah.
Right? You've got the theme down. You've kind of gotten some writing done.
You're like, oh, well, I have this card game. And you can even do a video game about a card game. Mm-hmm. They have tons of those out there.
They do. Didn't they do a Metal Gear Solid
They
was like a video game card game? Yeah. So this is probably going to take the longest amount of time. And Vincent and I would recommend that you have a team when you're doing this. It's harder to do game mechanic by yourself.
Yeah, I know a lot of people would, I want to make it start to finish, but you won't be really great at all of it all at once. You really want to stick with what you're good at. If you're good at artwork, then do the art. If you're good with the mechanics, stay with the mechanics. If you're a good writer, stay with being a writer.
Because that's kind of how we tend to split it up. I'm better at the writer part, and I kind of come up with the concept stuff, which it's really cheesy a lot of the time. Like, I'll give him a PowerPoint slides with pictures that I found, and I'll write little notes like, I want it to kind of look like this and kind of be like that. And then he does the game mechanics and some of the art, but usually we outsource the art actually to actual artists because neither one of us are artists.
No, I do okay, but you don't want your game to be just okay. You want your game to be great.
Mm-hmm. So back to mechanics, we were talking about mechanics. The mechanics have to kind of flow with the theme, but there isn't like a set mechanic that's really set for a specific theme. I think if you can imagine it, you can pretty much mesh it together. Mm-hmm. You know, just to kind of, you just have to lay that out.
Right.
You have to lay it out and make sure it works. A lot of the times when you're in that game mechanics, you're going to be in what we call the index card phase, where this is literally what we do, and a lot of the designers we know, it's the index cards. We used to handwrite them, but now we've gotten to where we just type stuff up and we put them on the index cards, and then you're playing it out really slowly, basically, not even with all the rules yet, and you're seeing, does this rule make sense? Does this work the way I thought it was?
And don't put yourself to where you're spending money on a nice prototype at this point.
Right.
Because
so much can change.
So much can change, and then you're like, oh, we're going to have to like reprint this over and over again. And you want to wait until you kind of got everything almost where you want it to be, and then you can tweak it as you need to be.
Yeah, so make sure that it's you and your group of designers that you're doing it in this prototype phase, and then you really want to get a couple of other groups of people while it's still in this prototype before you have the nice prototype, to make sure that you've got some of the major kinks out before you're out there trying to get other players. Because you don't want other players to start playing your games when they have a lot of kinks.
And you want a ton of people to play your game all the time, because sometimes all the scenarios won't come up with when you just play it with a few people. But when you play it with more, then other scenarios come up, and play it many times to make that happen.
Yeah.
But this is where we come to a point where we got all the mechanics down. We have all of the either cards or boards ready to go. And then we come to design. And this is where you want, and this is preliminary design, so you're just kind of getting...
Yeah, you kind of like are drawing your stick figures, your concept art, right? Because if you're not the artist, definitely, and you don't want that artist spending like a ton of time, you want to make sure that that concept kind of flows before you have the artist spending a ton of time. And then if you're doing the video game, this is where you're going to do the concept kind of layout of what those levels are going to look like.
Yeah.
Almost like storyboarding is kind of the best way I know how to explain it.
At this point,
you're kind of storyboarding. and you're saying this is how this is going to go. And if you're doing a tabletop game, you're designing those rules and how, making sure that those steps are storyboarded out so that your players understand the rules. Make sure when you're writing rules for the game, even if you're writing rules for an adult, imagine that you're still trying to explain it. We generally say to about a middle school person when it's an adult game. So imagine you're trying to explain it to a middle schooler, okay? Because what you have in your head needs to come out on the paper so people know how to play your game. So in that design aspect, think about how you're really explaining this to other people.
Because I think a lot of back in the day when people used to read newspapers, I know you might know what that is now. Or maybe you do. I'm joking.
Maybe.
I'm joking. But they would write it on a middle school level so the masses would understand it.
Exactly. And that's what you want to do so that you have more playability of your game and so that more people understand your game. So again, you're doing that design part. You're doing that concept mapping. You're really getting into what are the narratives of the game. If you're doing levels, you're doing storyboarding. So that whole design aspect.
And once you get your design concepts done, then that's when you want to start doing the prototyping.
The nice prototyping. Not the index cards anymore. So like for our card game, this was our first prototype that we had. We picked a smaller box. How many cards? Tell me again. I forgot how many cards it is.
That one was 108.
So 108 cards. So we got the company called the Game Crafter. And they made all of these cards for us for our card game. And then they made the box too. So we got to choose what type of box we wanted. And then you play it with people, right? You want it to look better than the index cards. And you want to play it with people. And you want to kind of send it out to people too, right?
Yes.
So we played like that for a while with the prototype. And then we got a secondary prototype. The box, as you can see, is bigger but thinner. And it became kind of easier for people to hold. And then it was 2 levels of cards so that they stacked, one level here, 1 level there. So that became our secondary prototype for the game. And this is the one that stuck.
That's the one that sucked.
People liked the way this could just kind of be thrown in like a backpack or something. This was a little bit bulkier to kind of throw into something, so they tended to like this one better. It's thinner. You want to think about things
box
like
got kind of loose really quick, and the cards would fall out.
You want to think about things about designing all the sides of the box, because this is another design aspect if you're using a tabletop game. Even if you're doing a video game and you have a cartridge, you still have to think about, what artwork is going on that. You don't do cartridges anymore, you do discs, but what artworks goes in.
What artworks go on the disc and whatnot, or downloadable content, or downloadables,
right,
video game stuff.
Or if you're going to do an app game, what is the app going to look like that's going to catch people's attention and let them know what your game is about? So when you're prototyping, you're doing all of that kind of stuff.
And that's kind of in general what you do to get started. We could probably go on and on because there's other aspects. There's other aspects to this, but right now this will get you going to get your game going. So make a game, have fun.
Yeah, and your teacher may be calling us and asking us to do a part 2 or a part 3.
Part 2.
So we'll see how that goes. If you guys have questions, just let him know and he'll let us know, and we're always down to make videos.
Yeah.
We hope this was helpful in your journey.
Yes.
Because we love to see new game makers out there.
So thanks for checking this out. I'm Vince.
I'm Colleen, and Zach is producing
Geek Out SA.